Question 9 is a fraction, decimals and percentage question, and it's worth 5 marks. I think this is a really lovely question. Last year, Yora spent 30% of his salary on rent, 2/5 of his salary on entertainment, 1/4 of his salary on living expenses. He saved the rest of his salary. Yora spent 3,600 on living expenses. Work out how much money he saved. Okay, so the point of this question, by the end, I want to know how much he saved. Now, all this gives me is what Yora has spent. So in order to know how much he saved, I need to first of all find how much he spent. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in money. Proportionally is enough. So Yora spent 30% of his salary on rent, 2/5 on entertainment, 1/4 on living expenses. I don't like the fact that there's a percentage there and 2 fractions. I can't work with things when they're not in the same format. So I'm going to put these as fractions. 30% as a fraction is 3/10 or 30/100. Now I've got those with a denominator of 10 or 100 if I wish. This is a denominator of 5. I don't like that. I want it to be the same as the one above. I can easily give that a denominator of 10 by multiplying it by 2, and then I have to multiply the top by 2. So that would be 40/10. No, it would be 4/10. It would be 40/100 if I wanted it out of 100. Now this is 1/4. I can't get that to be out of 10 because 4 doesn't times by anything easily to get to 10. So I'm going to have to put that out of 100. So 4 times what is 100? Well, that's 25. So I need to multiply the top by 25. So what I've got here is 30/100 is his rent, 40/100 is his entertainment, and 25/100 is his living expenses. So let's find out the proportion of his salary that he spent. He spent 30/100 and he spent 40/100 and he spent 25/100. Now the denominators are the same for all of these fractions, so that means the denominator in the answer is the same. And I've got 30 plus 40 is 70, plus another 25 is 95. So I know he has spent 95/100 of his salary, which I also know is 95%. So he spent 95% of his salary. From that, I can work out the proportion that he saved. And he saved the original 100% of his salary less the 95% that he spent, which means he's left with a saved amount of 5%. Now, that's great proportionally, but I want to know how much money he saved. So at some point, I need to calculate an amount. Now, the only information I have about an amount of money is here. Yora spent £3,600 on living expenses. So let's have a look what they said about living expenses up here. He spent 1/4 of his salary on living expenses. So we know that 1/4 of his salary equals £3,600. If we know that £3,600 is 1/4 of his salary, then I know that to get his full salary, I need to multiply that by 4. So 3,600 times by 4 is going to give me 14,100 £14,400. So that's how much he gets paid, £14,400. Now comes the tying together bit at the end. I know that he saved 5% of his salary. And I know that his salary is £14,400. So I ultimately need to find that he saved 5% of £14,400. Now in order to get to 5%, I need to go via 10%. So I know 100% is 14,400. I know in order to get to 10%, I can just divide that by 10, which is £1,440. And in order to get down to 5%, then I can just half it, and half of 1,440 is £720. So I know that he has saved £720. I'm going to make it clear down here that he has saved £720. Now, with regards to how the marks are distributed for this question, if I just zoom out, the first mark, the working mark, is up here. It's a B1 mark, and that is for converting into the fractions, decimals or percentages, whichever you've chosen to do. So that's for getting the units as standard. Now, the first method mark comes in at working out how much he spent. So that's the 95%. Is your first method mark for adding together all your equivalencies. Another method mark is for correctly working out that he saved 5%. The fourth working mark is for working out his full salary, which takes you up to 4 marks. And the fifth and final mark is for actually finding that 5% and getting the correct answer. Question 10 is a factorising question, and they want you to factorise fully. The fact that it says fully means it's worth 2 marks. Now, in order to factorise, you take the common factors out of something. It would be the opposite of expanding the bracket, so you need to find the common factors. The fact it says fully means that you need to identify the highest common factor of your terms. So here I've got the term 20w squared y plus the second term, which is 24wy cubed. Now, I'm going to take this as numbers first, which is 20 and 24, then my next letters, which are w and w squared, then my next ones, which are y and y cubed. So numbers first, I'm looking at 20 and 24. What's the highest number that goes into 20 and 24? It's 4. Now I'm looking at my w's. I've got w squared there and a w there. So I've only got one lot of w that's going to go into those because I can't get any bigger in there. Now I'm looking at my y's. I've got a y there and a y cubed there. Because there's only one y here, I can only have one y as a common factor. So I've got 4wy on the outside. Then I open my brackets up and I need to decide what I multiply 4wy by in order to get the answer of 20w squared y. So again, numbers first. 4 times what is 20? Well, that's 5. W times what is w squared? W. Y times what is y? Nothing. It's already y. So it's 5w plus 4 times what is 24? 6. W times what is w? No need for anything else because it's already w. And y times what is y cubed? Well, then that's y squared. So like I said, this is a 2-mark question. You get 1 mark for correctly identifying the highest common factor, and you get the 2nd mark for a 2-term expression with w and y, and you're allowed to make 1 error. Part B wants you to factorise a 3-part quadratic. These go into double brackets and they start with your squared term, which in this case is m. First thing I want to look at is this end number here, the product, because whatever two numbers I choose to have in here need to multiply together to give me 40. Now, the fact that it's a negative 40 means my signs are different. One has to be positive, one has to be negative. So I'm going to make a note of that. There's one positive, one negative. It doesn't matter which way around they are, as long as one's positive and as long as one's negative. What does matter is when you've identified your factors, you need to make sure that the positive one goes with the positive and the negative one goes with the negative. Now, I need to find two numbers that times together to give me 40 that add or take away from each other to give me 3. So they have a difference of 3. So the first thing I think of is 10 times 4, but that's got a difference of 6, so that's no good to me. Then I'm going to think of 5 and 8. 5 times 8 is 40, and yes, 5 and 8 have a difference of 3. So I know the numbers I'm going to use are 5 and 8. I need to decide which is going to be the positive, which is going to be the negative. Well, because the two numbers I choose also have to sum to positive 3, I know that if I had an 8 there and I took away 5, I'd be left with positive 3. So that would work nicely. But if I put the 5 there and took away 8, I would end up with negative 3, which is not what I want. So I need to make sure that the 8 is with the positive and the 5 is with the negative. And that's worth 2 marks. You get 1 mark for having the double brackets with m and 8 and 5. You get the second mark for getting the signs correct. So you can still get 1 mark by just identifying 8 and 5 and having the wrong signs. Question 11. A water trough is in the shape of a prism. This is the prism, and a prism is a 3D shape that has a uniform cross-section. So the reason this is a prism is because this front face runs all the way throughout that shape. Now, if you're being asked to find the volume of a prism, then the volume is always equal to the area of the uniform cross-section times by the depth, how back it goes. So, a water trough is in the shape of a prism. Hamish fills the trough completely. Water leaks from the bottom at a constant rate. That means it goes at the same speed. 2 hours later, the level of the water has fallen by 20 centimetres. Water continues to leak from the trough at the same rate. How many more minutes will it take for the trough to empty completely? Now, the first thing that's jumping out at me is the fact that we've got minutes there and they've mentioned hours here. I don't want to have any confusion in my question, so straight away, because the answer needs to be in minutes, instead of thinking about it in hours, I'm going to say, well, I know that 2 hours is 120 minutes. So from this point onwards, I'm going to consider the fact that we're dealing with 120 minutes instead of 2 hours. So he fills the trough and water leaks out to the bottom. After 2 hours, the level of the water has fallen by 20 centimetres. Let's look at the diagram. It's full to start with, so it's at the top here. It's fallen by 20 centimetres. Now looking at the diagram, I can see that 20 centimetres is the height of the rectangular bit on top of this prism, because this prism is actually made up of a rectangular part and then a trapezium. So this entire rectangular part, that's the cross section of it. This is its depth. That entire rectangular part is what has leaked out in the first 120 minutes. So what I need to do here is work out the volume of water that's left. So 120 minutes gives us an area of the rectangle, which is the base, which is 120, times by the height, which is 20. And that gives me 2 times 12 is 24, and there's 2 zeros, so that's 2,400. Then, to find the volume, I multiply it by the depth, which is 30, because it goes back 30. So 2,400 times by 30, well, 24 times by 3 is 72, and there's 1, 2, 3 zeros. So that's 72,000, and that is centimetres cubed, and that is the volume of that rectangle. Sorry, that is the volume of the rectangular section of the trough. So just in case, just because you missed that there, what I did is I multiplied this by 30 because that's the area, the depth is 30, and that's given me my volume. Now, that's the volume that's lost after 120 minutes. What I need to do here is find out the rate it's being lost at. So in 120 minutes, it lost 72,000 centimetres cubed. I would like to know how much it's losing every minute. In order to do that, I use a unitary method. To get from 120 minutes down to 1 minute, I divide by 120. I need to do that on both sides as if I was solving an equation. So that leaves me with 1 minute over here, and then I've got 72,000 divided by 120, which, if I wanted to, I could cancel the 0 down and have it as 7,200 divided by 12. Whichever way you look at it, the answer is going to be 600. And it's centimetres cubed, because remember, this is the volume that we lose every minute. Now, the question asks me how many more minutes will it take for the trough to empty completely. So right now, I've got water left in this white part of the trough. I need to find the volume of that part of the trough. So I'm going to switch colours. And first thing I'm going to do is find the area of that trapezium shape, which is the bottom of the trough. Now, area of a trapezium can be found on the formula sheet, and it's just there. So it's half of A plus B, which are the two parallel sides, and then it's multiplied by the perpendicular height. So in order to find the area of this trapezium, I need to find the parallel sides. That's one of them, that's the other, and that's 120, and that's 80. Now I need to know the perpendicular height, and that's actually given to me there. So the area of my trapezium is going to be half of A plus B times by height. So that is half of A plus B, 120 plus 80. And then I'm going to multiply that by my perpendicular height, which is there, 40. So let's deal with these brackets first. I've got inside the brackets 120 plus 80, which is 200. Now I'm doing half of 200, which is 100. I need to times that by the 40, and that's going to give me 1 times 4 is 4, and there are 3 zeros. So that gives me 4,000. Now that's the area. In order to make this volume, I need to multiply it by the depth, which is 30. 4,000 times by 30, well, 4 times by 3 is 12. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. So that's going to give me 120,000 centimetres cubed. And that is the volume of the bottom part of my tank. Now, because I know that there's 120,000 centimetres cubed left to empty in the tank, and I know that it comes out at 600 centimetres cubed per minute, in order to find out how many minutes that are left, I need to do my 120,000 divided by the 600 centimeters cubed per minute. If I wish, I can make it simpler by cancelling those zeros out, and then that leaves me with 1,200 divided by 6. Well, 12 divided by 6 first of all equals, I'm going to do it down here, equals 2, and then I've got 2 zeros I haven't accounted for, and that's my answer, 200 minutes. Now, with regards to how the marks are distributed for this question, you get, as you would imagine, 1 mark for correctly finding the volume of the rectangle. You get the second mark for dividing by 120 to find out how many centimeters cubed per minute you find. You get an answer mark for 600 centimeters cubed. You then get a method mark for finding the volume of the trapezium prism. You get the second method mark for dividing it by 600, and you get the third answer mark there. So that's where your 6 marks have come from. Question 12. You should see this question and celebrate if it comes up in your paper. Simplify m to the power of 0. Now, anything to the power of 0 equals 1. It's a 1 mark question. It's a 1 mark answer. Okay? The answer is just 1. You need to learn that. It's a recall thing. Now, for 12b, we need to simplify. We need to simplify 2x to the power of 6, y to the power of 1, all raised to the power of 3. Now, when you've got a power outside of the bracket, as with anything else outside brackets, it affects everything inside. So the first thing that power of 3 is affecting is my 2. So I've got 2 to the power of 3, which is equal to 2 times 2 times 2. 2 2s are 4, times by another 2 is 8. So my first number is going to be 8. Then I've got x to the power of 6 raised to the power of 3. Index laws here, so you need to make sure you're comfortable with those. 6 times 3 is 18, so that ends up as being x to the power of 18. So that can join my 8 over there. Then I've got y to the power of 1, and that's also cubed. So I multiply the two numbers together, it gives me y to the power of 3, and that can join its other chums over there. So the final answer is 8x to the power of 18, y to the power of 3.